So the same geniuses that just put out a 72-page report basically stating that the entire U.S. 7th Fleet is too tired and poorly trained to operate a rowboat across a mud puddle, now is saying that they want to keep them out there longer. I mean, forget the fact that immediately after, almost in the same breath, as they issued that 72-page slime of our servicemen, they decided, you know what? Even though they're poorly trained, even though they're tired, even though they're unmotivated and unable to do their job in the 7th Fleet, we're going to do something that we have never done before. We are going to operate 3 aircraft carrier groups simultaneously. Never before done, incredibly, their words, not mine, complex operation. Right after issuing that report that pretty much told the world that the United States 7th Fleet was incapable of doing its job. And here we are, what, 6 months later, and here's their fix? The idea here is they're saying that if they deploy them for longer stretches at a time without turnover, that the sailors aboard will be more trained and more able to train up new sailors who will then be more able to operate the ships more effectively. Basically stating that we are not training our sailors in their training phase, in their force creation phase well enough to do their jobs. Therefore, we need to continue their training after they're deployed. What could possibly go wrong? Anyway, I haven't done a Navy update for you guys in a while. And I just wanted to start here because this is just beyond ridiculous. And it pretty much, I mean, we've already hammered enough nails in the coffin of the story of the Fitzgerald and McCain to pretty much bury it, but we're just going to put a coat of shellac on it and be done with it. Because it's ridiculous. 100 videos, and we've showed from, you know, every possible angle you look at that they were lying. Anyway, but today's video, we're going to talk about a man named Kurt Tidd. And you're going to believe one of two things after watching the video today. Either Kurt Tidd is watching the Florida Maquis, and he is basing his entire command off of what I'm saying, or maybe what I'm saying is exactly the case in Central and South America. Now, I have 3 separate articles here, and the entire video today is all done off of one website, USNI. And we have 3 different articles from 3 different years, 2016, 17, and 18, talking from the same man, talking about the same issue. And he's going to detail for you pretty much exactly what I have been saying for the last year. In this first one, he makes the allegation here that we don't have nearly enough finance, nearly enough attention paid to the 4th Fleet, to Southcom. This is where those high-level Marine officers were targeted down in Colombia. And we know now that they weren't out chasing prostitutes, that they were specifically targeted by women who were not prostitutes and were drugged in a very systematic way to gain access to their electronics. In this one, he pretty much says right here, Admiral Kurt Tidd, testifying Thursday, and this is February 16th, 2018, so very, very recently, stated, let's see if I can get this right, lack of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance resources translates into interdicting only 1 in 4 known movements of narcotics. That means they see X amount of targets out there to interdict, and they only have the assets to interdict 25% of them. Imagine that if you were a combat team, and your job was to protect a border, and you saw 1,000 soldiers coming at you, and you only had enough resources to maybe stop 250 of them. How effective would you think you would be at doing your job, protecting that border? And he's saying we're not talking about brigade combat teams and aircraft carriers. Special operations teams working with security forces on land. And he talks about the Coast Guard. Several times during the hearing, Tidd stressed the need for recapitalizing that part of the Coast Guard's fleet. And I've said about this, we have $25 billion with a B dollars to build some fool's errand wall from Texas to California. And I know, and you think, oh, there he goes again. I'm like, this guy's going to say it. I got another tab up here where he pretty much agrees with me, word for word, that it's a waste of money. A fourth of that, $4 billion, $5 billion put into the Fourth Fleet? Are you kidding me? It would be a game changer down there. And he's saying, I'll never turn down any ship, but he really needs ships like these cutters and those old Spruance-class destroyers that could operate 2 helicopters. I think would be ideal. They're fast, they're cheap. And that's basically the gist of this. This is the most recent one. He's basically just reiterating what he said in the other two. We went backward just to show you this is where it's coming from now, but what he's been talking about. And he says there is no single silver bullet, and this is where he kind of alludes to the idea of the wall. And this one is what I've been talking about. The impact on Colombia, excuse me, I'm sorry, the allergies down here are terrible, which has received the largest number of refugees from Venezuela, goes beyond strains on its healthcare system and housing. Bogota fears refugees with dual citizenship could skew its coming elections by voting there. And here it talks about the agreement with the FARC. What also is a matter of concern to the command is we see significant presence of Cuban advisors to the Venezuelan security forces, and we know how that pretty much Cuba's the puppet of the Russians. Russia and China to keep Maduro in power. He's working military-to-military connections in the region to disprove Moscow and Beijing's claim that we are disengaging from the Americas. Now remember, this is Admiral Kurt Tidd saying this. China has also recently been inviting military officers from Central and South America to study there. Okay, and this is just tab 1. Here's tab 2. Now this is April 10, 2017, about a year ago, a little less. Russia, China, and Iran are increasing interest in Central South America, especially Moscow's renewed focus on Nicaragua. Wait till you hear this one. But more concerning is the Russian sale of 3,000 surface-to-air weapons and 50 tanks to Nicaragua, and are in discussions with them over fighter aircraft sales, joint exercises with the Nicaraguan military. Moscow has opened a facility in Nicaragua to bring the training directly there. And this talks about Daniel Ortega. And you can read through here, and they pretty much are just mimicking everything I'm saying about what is coming for Panama. 2 years ago, Moscow and Caracas agreed on a $15 billion oil and gas deal and the sale of fighter aircraft to the regime, and we've covered this. They have Tu-160 backfire nuclear-capable bombers on the tarmac in Venezuela. And here he says it again. Tidd says only 25% of the drugs that law enforcement agencies and Southern Command have identified as bound for the United States are intercepted. Lack of ships, lack of money, lack of people. Tidd says he has about 6 ships on a given day to stop the flow of narcotics, primarily cocaine from Colombia. The stated requirement from several years ago is 23. 450 tons a year. And he's not talking about coming across the border from Mexico. He's talking about coming through the Caribbean. Because he's not tasked with the border. He's tasked with the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, he goes through and pretty much says everything that I've been saying. And hopefully somebody will listen to him. These are adaptive threat networks and terrorist organizations such as the Islamic State. And listen to this. The Islamic State has had some success in recruiting foreign fighters from Trinidad and Tobago, but of more concern to Tid and nations in the command was the radicalization taking place among people who do not leave but intend to carry out terrorist attacks in their home country or against the United States. And this was last April from the commander of Southcom, talking about nations in Central America radicalizing people for attacks in their home countries and against the United States. If you don't want to believe me about Hezbollah and ELN and their desire to be here and affect these kinds of attacks, listen to the commander of Southcom. Listen to the man who's in charge of the Navy in this region. And this one goes back to March of 2016. March of 2016. Think of where you were and what you were doing. March of 2016. Okay? How long ago this was? Okay, this was the beginning, heading into the primary. The head of Southern Command told the Senate Armed Services Committee on Thursday, does not have the ships or aircraft to fully carry out the interdiction mission. Back then he says, I have 5 or 6, but the requirement was to have 21. Now it's up to 23. He said half of the at-sea interdictions were made with our partners. That means other navies in the region. To describe stopping the narcotics flow north was like squeezing a balloon, where large and small-scale smugglers adjust where they will land the drugs for transshipment. They will adapt, now using Panama rather than Guatemala. Southern Command's area responsibility to the north ends at the Mexican border. Just what I said. Okay, and here it talks about this. He said, most often the drugs are coming through the traditional legal border crossings, which will still be there if there is a wall. Okay, and he talks about, yes, do we need help from Mexico? Sure we do. But it's not going to fix it. And like he said, squeezing a balloon. You make it harder over there, they're just going to come, more is going to come through the Caribbean. He told the panel the border security with Mexico was not nearly as effective as we would like it to be. No one is saying that it is. But his quote, the Admiral in charge of Southcom, his quote, improved sensors, other technologies that take into account terrain would be helpful. Working with the Israelis on how to better identify and eliminate tunnels. They would definitely know how to do that. And so here's 3 tabs, same guy, over 3 years. And my channel's only been up for 16 months. And it says here, even if the last detainee left Guantanamo Bay, the facilities there would be of use during a migrant crisis in the Caribbean, most likely from Haiti or now from Venezuela, and should not be returned to the Cubans, he said. The United Nations has maintained a peacekeeping force in Haiti, primarily from Brazil in 2004. Different issue. But point being, folks, we have a problem. And is Mexico part of it? Yes. But the commander in charge of our forces in this region has for 3 years, been ringing this bell and trying to say, wake up, there are terrorists here. They are right across our border. They're being radicalized. And like I said, you don't have to believe the Florida Maquis. Come live in Florida. If you don't believe me, make your own assessments. And I tell you, this issue with this high school, if they knew, they would never let you know. And they would never give them the news cycle. Because if they came out and said, yeah, we found out that this kid has ties to terror, oh my God. That it would absolutely, the news cycle would go nuts. And these people would have gotten the crown, the cherry on their sundae to take over at least one news cycle. So, I'm just trying to reveal the truth. The real truth. The biggest threat to this country is not going to come from North Korea. It's going to come from right across, not Mexico. It's going to come from the Caribbean and South America. Like, share, subscribe.